empowering with, I mean, it's so many emotions, right? So many things.
Yeah, I think we're live. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so it's a powerful time.
Let me pull up our run a show here real quick, and then we're going to wait for everyone to jump on. If you have not changed your chat settings, if you go down to the bottom, you can see who you're directly speaking to. If you change it to all panelists and attendees, that way when you are communicating, it's going to the chat and not specifically to someone in private. Or if you would like to just hit us direct, you're more than welcome to do that as well. And if you have a specific question, it always helps us hit all the questions if you put it in the Q&A tab. We do our best to kind of filter through the chat throughout our conversation, but that helps us see all the questions that everyone has. So thank you for that.
Henry, do you have one of those nifty camera covers on your computer? You just slide over a little thing?
I do. It's amazing. I suggest it for everybody. It's literally like a little window I can just slide. That's amazing that you knew that.
Oh, my mom has one and she's in IT. She's always telling me to be safer.
I just bought a laptop yesterday and realized now, like, oh, I have to use my old laptop for the show because I don't have one of those, but it's very handy. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. This is our latest class so far. So if you're from the UK and you're staying up late with us, put it in the chat. I'd love to hear from you.
For the first time ever, I welcomed all of our night owls who are up overnight to watch us.
Looks like John Paul's in London for sure.
And I think I saw that Andy is here from Berlin.
Okay.
And Olga.
Europe. Maybe Australia's waking up early.
That's fair. Yeah. All right. I got to run a show here.
All right. I'm ready to go whenever you guys are. I think. Wait,
Jim said he was going to try to make it. He was driving, but he told us
right now. So he's with us in Zen.
Okay.
But
we just get rolling, and then when Jim jumps in here, we'll get him in. I think we got everybody. Are we missing someone? Is 5-1 on this one today?
No, he's doing yoga right now. He said.
Okay. Maybe I missed that.
Maybe we should have made him do yoga on here. It'd been great.
No worries. All right, well, cool. Let's kick this thing off. Thank you to everyone who stuck around to join us for one of our later episodes. We appreciate y'all making the time to be here with us. We have made it to our 24th webinar, and we could not be more excited to be diving into green touring today. Our conversations yesterday, I was buzzing around so many new innovations and how we can have a foot forward in a green new direction. So I'm going to pass it over to Henry, and we'll get this thing started. And yeah, green touring. So let's do this thing.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, normally right now I would have like a very well written out intro, but to describe our guests. But after talking with them yesterday, I don't even want to attempt to describe who these people are and what they do. I leave it to them because they're fascinating, and I'm really excited about today's talk. And just leading into this, just know that this is after yesterday's talk, we were really inspired by it, and so this is sort of an introductory episode to maybe a series that we're putting together with these people and everybody here, because I think that we can make a difference, and we see that we can actually put our minds together, and this is a great space for it. So if you guys wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then let's just jump into it. Jen, go first, please.
Oh, hi. My brain always organizes alphabetically, so I was just assuming I was after. No, thank you. Hi, it's such an honor to be with this group of people. I have so much love and respect for this particular aspect of the live entertainment industry. And so my name's Jen Regan. I identify as she, her. I'm 34, born and raised in Santa Monica, moved around. I got out, I studied sustainability in college, but I grew up in a live entertainment family. So I started as a stage manager, did theater productions, and got my first foot in the door at AEG. I was their first environmental employee in 2007, and I got to help with Amy Morrison and Larry Ballin and Rob Hallett, who you had on your last session, and many others in defining environmental standards for the live event industry through the lens of AEG's decision makers. So we were the first to market with the sustainability report, first to measure the portfolio of all our venues. And what I was doing was taking sustainability practices from mainstream businesses and CSR and adapting them to the wild west of live events. The one thing I didn't get while I was at AEG, I never could understand, was the touring side. Like, I would talk to Amy and Larry and others, but I never had time. I was always with festivals and venues. And so afterwards, I was really hungry to do more touring work. I had worked alongside Mike Martin, who is with Effect Partners, the founder of Effect Partners, for years. And I went out on my own after AEG, and I did a lot of sports and event consulting, but I was always drawn to the final frontier for me, which was live event touring. And Mike had been the sustainability director for U2 and doing sustainability for different tours, working with Jack Johnson and others. He helped found Reverb with Adam Gardners and others. So when I got a chance to come over and work with him, it was a dream come true. So I got to go on the road with U2 on the Experience and Innocence tour and take all of my live event sustainability and live sports knowledge and finally understand the realities of touring. So I come from that background of thinking of how do I structure things under the pressures of our industry? You know, how do you take all this great complex science of sustainability and translate it to a one-page summary sheet for a crew chief for their load in and their load out? And that's kind of my specialty. And so if I could just turn it over to Anthony, my whole role historically has been finding the Antonys and others who build these really environmentally centric projects. I don't want to speak for you, Anthony. And my role is to find these people and help elevate them within the context of a business that historically hasn't known how to fit them in, except for maybe a fan engagement. So I try to make it a part of the day-to-day, and that's me.
Thanks, Jen. Well, I started my life as a sound engineer, actually, some many moons ago. If anyone saw me yesterday, you would know I had a big beard and long hair, because I've been in that COVID space for a while, and I decided yesterday would be the day. So apologies for those that are confused on this webinar who I am, but I'm the shaved version of my yesterday. But I started as an engineer, and then I spent many years in the theatre before going into being a technical director in actually events and clubs in London. I spent a good 5 or 6 years doing 60-hour shifts straight back to back on show after show after show before I moved into touring. And I spent quite a long time in the touring world in lots of different perspectives: tour management, production management, design, coordination, assisting, getting the coffee, driving the van. I mean, every version of it. And I moved into what I call the solutionist space, which is focusing on environmental challenges way back early in 2007 after Live Earth, when I was working with my then client Black Eyed Peas, and we performed at Wembley. And what became apparent on that week for me was just how bad the crisis was on the planet. And I was just sort of like, at that time, not knowing very much, starting to read books and sort of like get a good understanding. And kind of fast forward many years, I'm now on the other side trying to understand what Jen's doing. So Jen has the technical ability, and I guess I have some industry experience, but I haven't been in touring for a number of years. But I do think that, and I spoke to everyone yesterday about this, I think if you took a very pragmatic approach to same ways of tours putting together and align the tools that you've built with the way that these tours are built, I actually think it would be easier than you think to align sensible processes of sustainable practices with everyday life on the road. So, and I actually think it's good and healthy and keeps everyone fit. So,
I agree. And I think that that's why we wanted to do this episode. And, I want to be the first one to admit that, I've been attempting to do the green thing on tour for many years, and we've had great success, but I still felt like that there's so much to do, and there's so much to know that we all agreed yesterday that this episode, we up here are going to be the students as well with you today. There's a lot for us to learn and share. So I want to sit with Jen for a second and talk about just sustainability, what that means, and sort of the overview of some of the concepts that we're going to talk about today, because it goes beyond some of our normal touring language, but she's amazing at breaking it down into a language that we understand. So Jen, educate us a little bit into the world of green touring.
Yeah, and Anthony will continue adding on to this, right? Because
Yes, this is a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. We are both we both but what I wanted to mention Anthony first, and that's why it comes up first, is because there is such a dearth of very amazing intellectual resources that are really awesome and informative, but they're complex. So and when you have an industry that is so dependent on being able to call someone and say, hey, can you jump onto this gig? And you have to know what you're doing, but you can't necessarily, there's not a lot of education time, a lot of nice, like, let's explore a new topic or philosophy time. So there's a philosophy behind it. And I think we share a lot of the same philosophical approach. So sustainability, there's a definition that most of us have heard of, especially because there are so many people in Europe who are joining us. Actually, I want to say something I didn't say yesterday, so hopefully I don't offend anyone, which is having worked for a US-based company that was multinational, one of the things I observed was a huge difference in the culture of how green or sustainability is approached. In the UK and in the EU, sustainability has been a part of legal practices for a lot longer time than the United States. Because of that, the laws and the expectation from a legal standpoint are much greater. So the willingness of venues to comply with requests from artists, the willingness of certain things, that's not even questioned. There's no pushback from any city in any part of the country when you're traveling on a global tour and you ask for something about sustainability internationally. In the US, it's been different. Legal policies have not been that widely adopted, and the majority of the environmental movement in the US has been led by consumer-facing, public-facing constituents asking for it. So what I found working across these different regions is that there's a lot of green living and green culture mindset that's huge in the US, but from a legal and policy standpoint, there are things that US people don't know about. So if I say ISO 21000, or ISO 14001, I bet you all our European tour manager people are like, oh, I know what that is. We did, this rugby game or that Quidditch match, or I said Quidditch, which is definitely fictional. I apologize for that. Cricket is what I meant to say, but clearly I have Harry Potter on the brain. So if I say ISO 14001 or maybe even the UN Sustainable Development Goals, that might be a foreign concept for a US person, whereas the UK EU people are probably familiar with those concepts. In the US, if I say green living or zero waste or plastic free, everyone should know that. But in the US, those are the terms we're used to. Or the one thing I can say in the US is LEED certification. We all now know what LEED certification is. But the point being, the US-centric point has a lot of definitions of sustainability that we adapted in a way that the EU is already understand. So the definition is to make decisions today that allow for future generations to have the same access, if not a better quality of life as we do today. And we have to understand that resources actually are finite. And even the ones that are renewable, like let's say water, fresh water, if we use them too fast, the way in which they naturally replenish cannot keep up with the pace of our consumption. So there's just these general concepts of sustainability that we learn. So the goal of sustainability is to take these ecological concepts and apply them to our commercial system, our industry. So we take materials responsibly. We make the materials to be taken apart responsibly. So we reduce our waste and we have to take less materials in the future. So when I look at sustainability, I'm looking at all of these tools and resources from these international policies, and I'm adapting them for our industry. So specifically, what does a zero waste plan for a tour look like, right? What does energy efficiency guidelines for a mobile generator look like? Or creating requests for your rocket cargo or sound moves, or your, what are the routing considerations in terms of transportation or the fuel of your transportation? So we think about sustainability from the resources and materials you use, how you use it, and what happens after. And then we think about, well, what if I kept doing this? What's the impact of this over time? So do I need to actually change how I'm doing this so I can continue to do this for longer? So that's like the most basic way I can think to get everyone on the same page about that. And I'm skipping over some really immense things that I think Anthony's going to come in and sweep and clean up for me.
No, that makes sense. I was following it. It does go into these big, broad topics because we're talking about a worldwide thing, but you do a great job of breaking it into our touring language. And so that's sustainability. And I learned a lot yesterday about how there's also regenerative systems, and it's a completely different thing. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Giving me the definition of that again?
Yeah. And so the way I think of sustainability, the term that we're all hearing, I think sustainability references these these policies, these tools, the corporate social responsibility framework to help organizations manage their environmental impact and to help decision makers make better decisions on a day-to-day basis. But that still doesn't actually heal the amount of environmental degradation we're living in now. And so what we're seeing is those who are innovating, those who are truly trying to move our society forward, are focusing on regenerative systems. And regenerative systems, which I know Anthony will want to add more to, because I know he's been working intimately on some of those. Regenerative systems are actually people who are tackling a problem with the idea that not only are we going to still be able, so there's regenerative agriculture, not only are we going to be able to grow enough food, we're actually going to grow it in a way that when we grow it, we make the soil more rich and more nutrient rich. So we're not just neutral or minimizing impact, we're replenishing and regenerating. So what we do actually allows us to do more with less, or do more in a healthier way. And so as a sustainability person in touring, what that means is a lot of us have invested in carbon offsets. Fantastic, makes sense. Carbon offsets, a mitigation measure. It's neutralizing what we're already doing or lessening an impact. It's not necessarily giving back or creating. So one of the things we're looking at doing with some of the tours I work on is investing in regenerative climate carbon removal, or projects that actually produce, that actually absorb carbon and leave the air better than just avoiding carbon, which gets very technical and wonky. But that's kind of an innovative project that I think everyone should be looking at, but maybe won't be built into how they do their day-to-day business quite yet.
Anthony, jump in here with where we're at in the conversation. It's kind of understanding that the two broad topics of sustainability and regenerative systems, but then add to that, and then let's go deeper into what this means for touring and how we add it into our world.
Yeah, I think Jen said it really well yesterday. You know, we talk about sustainability as like sustaining something. So they're the tools that we have today. Really regenerative is really the innovation of like, we can't sustain life anymore, because, you know, the reports say that, you know, in the next 7 years, if we don't make changes, then sustainability is out the window. And so then the question is, if sustainability is out the window because we've gone past the point of no return, if anyone is familiar with the Paris Climate Agreement, or the IPCC report that says that basically, you know, if we continue to live on the planet as we are, we will see climate change really affect how the world is going to operate, and there's going to be some really major challenges. Then we have to ask the question of, are we living in a sustainable society, or do we need to regenerate what we've already destroyed? So the argument really has been, are we supposed to be talking about sustainability, or are we supposed to be talking about regenerative? And I actually was thinking about, how do you apply this in this language? And so I would do this. I'd say, when we build tours, we spend a vast amount of money on innovation. You know, if you think about some of the most amazing productions that are built, they rely on innovation. And artists consistently over the years have always been at the forefront of investing in innovation. And that's what made their touring very special. Whether it was the first light fixture, moving head, whether it was the first LED panels, whether it was the first integration, like there's a list and list and list of innovation that's taken place, because artists, tour managers and production managers and managers have really been bolden on innovation. Live Nation, AEG, been bolden on innovation. And so I guess the question would be, do we want to take a sustainable approach or an innovational approach? Of course, me being in the space of innovation, I took a regenerative systems approach, because I'm not really interested in having a conversation 7 years from now on how nothing got done. So if you take an innovational approach and you kind of like get to sustainability, you're already winning. If you take a sustainable approach and you get to zero, nothing got done, then you're really losing. So for me, innovation is in the regenerative systems. There's another great word that comes up a lot, which we'll have a great conversation with your artists, which is circular economies. And circular economies has really been driven by the fashion industry in terms of how they have to rethink about how clothes are made and what we wear every day. And so there is some great language now that's crossing over between like culture, high street, retail, which affects our artists, the artist communication, how they sell to the consumer on, say, the tour management, tour management, communications, PR, marketing side, versus, say, regenerative systems and or kind of like the operational side of building a production. And I was thinking yesterday, Jen, thanks to you, is like, actually the conversation here could just be very simple, right? is like when you put a tour together and you think about your resources on that tour, when you start off on your very first tour in a van, or you're driving around, to when you've got 40 plus trucks, the process of building that is through a methodology of building a production, whether it's the creative and into design into the build into the operations. I actually think there's a really great opportunity for this team, especially with the quality of this team, to be able to take very simple processes into budgeting and planning that would then start to enable them to think about the same way we think about reducing a budget. They can think about reducing their input, their impact. And so I think reductionism is a great word. It's just the more you reduce down, the less impact you have. And it's a great thinking going into this.
Great. You guys have given us a great global view of an introduction to this. You've given us definitions of sustainability versus regenerative systems. And I know those are incredibly complex issues that you've managed to boil down for us. I was wondering, first of all, we will be having people watching that have never been on tour. And secondly, we will have people who are watching who maybe have been on tour who might think, well, why is this so important? Why does this apply so directly to touring? And just before I let you go on that one, it's my sense that we typically associate the arts communities and the creative industries with being at the forefront of these kinds of initiatives, of generally being more progressive. And my experience of it, even as somebody who's, as Henry said in his intro, and I'm sure everyone on this panel can identify with, I've wanted to make a change. I've tried to make, and it's probably got as far as reusable water bottles on the tour. And that's a tiny drop in a massive ocean. So could you speak to, so I guess what I was saying there is that we're actually not at the forefront of this. We're actually dragging our heels is my read of the situation. Could Jen and Anthony, could you both address what the practical environmental implications are directly from touring? Like what those are, what we do as an industry that causes so much damage to the environment.
Jen, I'll let you take the first part of that if you want. Or I can if you want. You're cool.
I was muted. Yeah, would you like to start? Go ahead.
I mean, I would start at the top of that, breaking it down into the what can we do? We're already doing it, right? I mean, unless you're in the conversation, you can't possibly innovate. So I think just the fact that you showing up and you're having the conversation means that everyone leaves with more information they came in with, is where you start with innovation, period. So just showing up, learning, understanding, and having a conversation is huge leaps and bounds from where we were 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, right? 2007, it was everywhere in the press, but it was never in the way we operated tours. Although I will say, actually back then, coming back to me in a second, the production manager for one of the bands I was working with, another British guy who's terrible because I've known him 15 years, was actually working on like, how do we reduce down our impacts? And some tours that went out really worked hard. We talked about this stuff in the mid 2000s, but it never really got anywhere. Biofuels was a big conversation. How to reduce down our emissions? How do we reduce down our electrical impact on site by LED, which I'll let Jane get into in a second. But I would say that just the fact that we're having the conversation and regenerative systems is even in the dialogue means that we're now talking about future technologies, which is phenomenal progress. Just the fact we're having it is phenomenal progress. In the 8 years I've been in it, it's the first conversation I've had with this industry about something that should have been spoke about 20 years ago. So congratulations, guys. You're really breaking ground.
Thanks. I mean, you guys really opened up our eyes to a lot of things. I mean, like Doug said, my mind kind of only went as far as the water bottles, and I wanted to do more, and I didn't realize how bad it was. But I mean, Jen, how bad is it? I mean, all the trucks, the buses, planes, I want to, we can touch on this later, but even pyro had a huge impact, and I didn't realize that, and lighting. And so we want to talk about all this, and that's, but keep going. Tell me how bad is it? How bad over the last...
Well, the reason I started that general topic about saying the take, make, waste concept is because, well, first of all, I have to say this before I get into this, because I'm about to just spitball and go really fast because I know everyone here can handle that. But I want to, kind of echo what Anthony said, but I want to say this. This topic is very overwhelming because it's about a lot of personal decisions. And as much as we like to think they're not personal, they are a lot of personal decisions, because if you're the tour manager or you're the crew chief or whoever you are, and each decision is not uniform. There is no black and white in environmentalism. And so there is no right or wrong. There are scenarios and data and there's prioritization. So an example, as I start to go into some of the nuances, I just want to remind you that you are not alone in this, and that a lot of people are coming together to solve this. Your suppliers are coming together to solve this. And it's only by having these conversations and going into the complexity that we can find simple solutions. So just bear with me. And if I say something overwhelming, put it in the comments, but just know I am absolutely committed that we can find simple solutions, but we will be in complexity on our journey to find those simple solutions. And so, let's break it down. Take, make, waste, right? There are a couple key categories. There's energy, climate. I'm looking at our run a show notes so I don't mess anything up, right? There's sourcing, how you source materials, how you source food. There's waste to recycling, there's transportation, there's crew and fans. You think about that stuff from a perspective of your logistics or your risk or your cost and your budget. I think about that stuff in terms of what resources are being deployed, where are they coming from, what level of sustainability has been considered, how are they going to be used, how are the people who are using them going to be informed, and then after you're done using it, what happens? So from an energy perspective, at the earliest phase, we have the lighting design and the choice about the energy intensity of the show. And a lot of things that we deal with is that a touring show does not have a guaranteed consistent energy output wherever they go, so they travel with mobile energy. So there are energy, you're having to make sure that there is an X amount of energy everywhere you go. You're consuming fuel, you're burning fuel. The number one issue that we are talking about that is destroying the planet is climate change. And we say destroying the planet sounds so doomsday, but the truth is there's a lot of incredible research, and we're actually alive watching extreme weather events. So something that some people don't like to admit or face is that when climate change, it affects the way we know life. So sea levels will rise in some places, and other places will experience extreme droughts. And when you have extreme droughts and sea level rising, some places will literally have more illnesses, more airborne illnesses. Some places will have more earthquakes and or hurricanes because they have the changing weather patterns. And in our cities, like really important cities to our touring industry, like Singapore or Miami, are actually going to be seeing in our lifetime, we are going to see the shoreline change. So this isn't like a hypothetical thing anymore. Climate change is happening. And the biggest contribution to climate change is the consumption of oil. And that's why you see so many fans getting outraged by bands that I support and work with, like U2 flying private jets, because that's one of the most visible things fans are being told by their governments they need to stop doing, right? Fans are getting a message from their governments that energy consumption is bad and that they need to be better at saving energy. So whatever fans are hearing are going to be what they're going to be asking for of us. So one of the biggest impacts of touring that we get slammed for the most, and probably is the hardest to deal with, is our transportation impacts, the cost of it's, and it's really about the fuel consumption, and it's our impacts around fuel consumption from energy and how energy intensive, and then how we transport our people and our belongings. That's one of the biggest first things. But then there are other things like, are you using plastic on your tour? And what materials do you use? Are you building a set that you can reuse after, or is the entire set going to be destroyed? Are you building green rooms in every single city with brand new furniture and brand new plants that then get left and discarded? Or are you working to make sure that those are donated or repurposed in the community after? So when I go through each of these categories, when you say, what is the impact? First and foremost, fuel consumption directly leads to climate change. The way to get rid of that and reduce it is alternative fuels or existing shore power that's efficient. So if you go to a venue that has solar powers, like only choosing venues that have efficient energy. Like one of the most radical ideas, and no one likes this, but it's one of the most radical ideas for touring, is if you actually routed your tour based on sustainability. only played venues with a certain percentage of coal-powered energy. So right now in California, just to let you know, 70% of the energy for most of the sports venues are not coal-powered. So you play in California, that's a good thing. But if you play in certain other parts in California of the country, the energy that comes to the venue could be predominantly coal powered or nuclear powered. So these kind of topics, I'm getting a little lost. So I'm going to take us back.
No,
So-
you're not, because like
Yeah.
right there, I just wanted to say that like at
Yeah,
that
tell
level, that's not even a tour manager's decision. And so it's important that everybody at the table in the industry is thinking about this and putting it first, because that is an agent and a manager and an artist decision about where they play, how they go about that first step of where to book the shows. And then it gets handed down to us, and then we can go in and make changes where we can, but that's very rare. So, you know, but the best I could do is educate my artists or my agents. And can we at least have a shot at some of these venues? If there was a list, can I get a certain percentage of the tours hitting these green venues? You know, that's something that I would hope to be able to do, but probably doesn't happen as much as we'd like, huh? No.
No,
I think that might be the big question, right? We talked about system design yesterday, and when we talk about system design at an event level or a tour level, you're talking about the design of that one tour. So if you're on a one truck tour, it's the design and operations of that one piece. And if you're on a 40 truck tour, it's that piece. But when you take a step up, you're then talking about the routing of the whole tour. When you take another step up, you're talking about the buildings that are included. And when you take another step up, you're now at government level. So some of it will depend on where you're coming into the conversation and the impact and the influence that you might have. The question for the industry will be whether they want to have a positive impact. And if the answer is yes, then everybody that is able to make a change should be working innovationally to make a change. For instance, if you're working on a small tour and you at least start, because look, when we route a tour, right, we have to build a budget. We already know, you know, and it's interesting, you brought Rocket Cargo, but like Rocket Cargo don't do the tour routing. So, but you know who does? Henry, right? Or Doug. And you know what they do? They have to go through and budget their tour. And guess what? They've got to work out how many miles is in there and how much their freight is. They're already doing the work. Like anyone that's routing a tour operationally is already doing that work. So adding 2 columns or 3 columns to understand the impact of the fuel measurements is actually where the change happens. It doesn't happen elsewhere. It happens at that budget level, right? Where you think about the operation. So everybody here that on this call that is ever involved in budgeting has the opportunity to really go learn how to put some tools into their budget to answer some questions, answer their own questions of what is my impact for my tour? How much fuel did I use? What is that offset? There is so many calculators now. You can Google it, CO2, you know, like offset, like you can put your routing numbers in there and you can do the work. And I think it's more about putting the tools in the hands of everyone now, because this is not a one person job. This is an every person job. And so to Jen, to that point, I think that the marriage of your expertise with this industry and actually starting at a very pragmatic point from each area would enable each component of the large system to really think about implementation of site selection, resource management, energy, production, procurement, food and beverage. Like when we do our riders, like should we, you know, like we always talk about reductionism. Well, I talk about reductionism a lot because from a philosophy perspective, it was the same way as when we used to try to save money on tour. You know, you get a new tour and the first job is to save a bunch of money. You look at all the crap you don't need. And every production manager, tour manager that's taken on some other tour that's not cost effective has been told to reduce prices. They're not selling enough tickets. You know, it's like, that's the first place you start. So I think it's in the DNA of everyone that built a tour is reductionism. How do you reduce down? And I think if they were just given the tools to really apply them in their budgeting, I think you would see a drastic change.
And I wanted to jump in on that. Sorry, Henry. I want to let me know. Cut me off anytime. This is just the beginning conversation, as you said. So just keep reminding me that.
I'm the student today, so please.
Something that, you know, we talked about when we were talking yesterday is, or I just said to you guys, is my role is to help decision makers prioritize. And so actually one of the things that I think of when I'm prioritizing, because it is unreasonable to think you're going to take action in all of these areas immediately when you come in as the tour manager, if the artist and others haven't decided that that's the mission of this tour, right? There will be some select innovative tours that will make it a mission to be as environmentally friendly. Most of us are being asked to make what has already been decided as environmentally friendly as possible within that context or that framework. We're getting it, as you said, already after a lot of big significant decisions are made. So then my role is to help prioritize within that framework. And so in that case, oftentimes the energy decisions, the routing decisions, the biggest area of topic, climate, is actually already addressed. So all I can do is help create plans that are innovative to mitigate or offset the carbon and educate people so they know why it's such a big topic on fans. But I always like to prioritize my initiatives based on where are we traveling, what regions are we in, what are the issues that they're facing, and specifically what is the value proposition of this artist or this tour team. And one of the biggest things I know is that we want to make these programs tangible for the crew first, because the crew is the one responsible for stewarding this program every day, right? These decisions about a program can be made in an office apart from the people who actually have to put stuff in the ground. But so for me, that's where we come to looking at waste. Waste is, and water, we go back to the reusable water bottles, because when fans and when crew think about environment, they think about what they can see and what they can feel. And what they can see and feel is the food they eat, the packaging around anything that's given them, and what their water and drinking solution is. And then when they go to throw food away or throw things away, those are the areas that are high touch. And that's why you see a lot of great programs. You've seen Reverb do a lot of programs around reusable fillable waters. A lot of our clients come to us and want zero waste plans. And because it's so high touch and highly visible. But arguably speaking, from a metric standpoint, the waste of a crew of 124 people traveling in the small context of a venue with, I'm sorry, I'm talking about a bigger tour. I know we have smaller tours and less.
That's okay. That's good.
Yeah.
But that waste numbers, we're talking pounds. We're talking about diverting pounds of waste, which is valuable, but not as valuable. The reason we're really doing it is because it feels good and it gives a tangible experience to the tour crew. So when you ask them to do other things, like maybe bunk more people in a bus to reduce your bus numbers, or when you start to bring in maybe more high impact, like reducing one bus or one truck from a tour is way more impactful than getting the tour to recycle, depending on the region that you're traveling through. But we're talking about a quality of life for these crew that we're traveling around. And so we're trying to kind of compromise and choose an experience, but we're at the start of the journey. So going back, we can definitely do these waste programs and these reusable bottle programs, but when we're looking at a metric perspective of where the biggest impact is, a lot of that comes down to the bigger tour decisions.
So, I'm gonna challenge you on a couple of things, Jen.
Please do.
Keep going.
I'm going to challenge everybody on a couple of things. Anybody that's involved in the technology side of the industry, specifically those working in probably lighting, video, sound, that are heavy on the tech side, soft tech, hard tech, websites, anything at all, AI and the future of the world, mixed with what's going on with Corona. The question I have is, we're talking about an industry that existed pre this, right? I'm going to measure a little bit here because I want to measure the impact that we're having as humans on the planet with where we are today from Corona perspective, with what's going on with the technology advances. And there's a great word called converging. And it's when different technologies converge to make change. And there's a great book called The Future is Faster Than You Think, which really kind of talks about like where we're going versus where we've come from. So the question I have actually to you is, you know, a lot of what you're talking about, the large tours, we had a great question coming. Is it more efficient? Is it more fuel efficient to have more trucks and flat pack for lighter load, or less trucks with double or triple stack cases, right? So is it better and more fuel efficient to have more trucks, less fuel, or right? So there is no, there is actually calculators out there that we could do that for you. If you gave us a number of trucks and a number of miles, it's actually quite easy to do. You can actually Google that now. So the tools are there. Making them available, I think, is what you talked about yesterday. But I have a question which kind of I think is poignant to today, is like, are we talking about yesterday, or are we talking about moving forward? Because it goes back to everybody on the call, whether you're on your first tour or a stadium tour. At the very beginning of your career, you get very good at building budgets for very small movements. And at the end, you get very good at building tours, moving lots of things. And the creature comforts on the road they all are counteractive to actually working in an efficient tour from a sustainability perspective. They actually are they're the opposite. Like what we would have to do with sustainable is opposite to what we've built culturally. So is there an opportunity here to address the culture of touring and really ask the question if it's possible to reverse the thinking? Because we get, you know, when you're on the road and anyone spends a long time on the road, most of the job is to make people comfortable because it's you out there. You know, you're out there from anywhere from 10 days to 360 days a year. And it's counterintuitive, right, to then start thinking about reducing down the crew cost, the crew impacts and the travel impacts. So the question is, and I think this then goes to the panel, do we see the industry going back to where we came from? Or do we see an opportunity to redesign the industry, thinking about these things, going out of COVID, going into the future, but that would mean work, commitment, training, rethinking. So is this an opportunity to think about the next 10 years differently? Or are we just going to continue fighting a battle we can't win, and everyone then goes puts up 40 trucks tour and make sure that they've got their private plane? So I'm going to go to Henry first, because I know this is going to be part of Henry's thinking over the next 24 hours. You getting private planes? Are you going to keep them going? Are you going to go retrain? You know, I mean, this goes to everybody as like, where do we think about going as a team and as a united front in terms of learning, and what's the possibilities from here? What can converge? What can change? Henry?
It's absolutely an opportunity to make a big change. It's going to be that whether we like it or not. And so making the best of it and putting all of what we've learned over the last couple of months to best practices and moving forward. I mean, yes, concerts are going to rethink the way we're doing them anyways. And so this is a good time to implement this. And this is why I want to know more. And we want to turn this into a series of episodes. So we have more takeaways, and we want to create simple things that we can implement into everybody's shows, whether you're starting in clubs or when you get back to arenas. All of this can be implemented, because as we've learned over how many months now of doing this language, this community of touring, we do have that pack mentality, and we can make a change in this. And new students can start doing this from the get, so you don't have to unlearn the stuff, the mistakes that I've learned, and we can do it differently. So anybody else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, I something that we talked about yesterday. I think whilst we have to acknowledge that budgets are going to be tight when we get back to touring, things are not going to start the way that they stopped. Mm-hmm. You can spin that in a positive way. You know, if you look at environmental things that you can, sustainability practices that you can put into place that might potentially save you money. You know, cutting a truck is going to save you money. Cutting a bus is going to save you money. There's a tangible saving there, which is going to, and maybe there will be things that come out of the budgetary tightening that benefit this. But I'm not under any illusion that that might be a short-term thing. And I think one thing that has, with everything that's going on in the world right now, currently, within the last 2 weeks with the race relations issue, I think a lot of people, especially white people, have, it's almost like a light bulb's gone off in their head, and they realize it's not enough to act passively or engage in performative activism, that they have to be more proactive. And I think it's no coincidence that this realization has hit while we all have time on our hands, because we're not on tour working 18-hour days. We're sitting at home absorbing information from people. So hope there's nothing to say that we can't take the same principles from what is happening with that issue over to environmental issues, because they are both incredibly important as we move forward.
Well, when you say that, Doug, you remind me, one of the biggest things I know that I'm advocating for from my vantage point is, and Effect Partners is the inclusion of wellness, the health and mental health of crew, and justice in the work that we're doing around sustainability. So actually, Olga just asked a question about the choice to travel with stage crew versus using local crew. And one of the things about, from a justice perspective, that we haven't talked about, which to me is a part of, when we're talking about a regenerative society, looking at the impact of touring, we want to think about what are the hiring practices of the local crews? Are you sure the local crews have hiring practices that match the standard of your crew's hiring practices and how employees are treated? And so, Olga, I could love to follow up with you offline about the climate impact of your question. She's asking if, a bus of an extra bus of crew and feeding and handling more crew is more environmentally impactful than hiring locally. There's also a social justice component to that. Is hiring locally important to continue to support? How are you able to set these standards of how we treat our employees and how we actually create equal opportunity for people to get into the touring industry and to really elevate different voices and different experiences in the touring industry? So I think the same thinking and systems design thinking that we're working on to bring sustainability, to me, is part and parcel to bring in a conversation of wellness. How are we making sure the food that we're feeding, the rhythm or schedule is actually so people in the touring industry can sustain their health and their bodies and their minds, that we have support for some of the hard experiences that touring professionals have. Similarly speaking, are we thinking about the labor conditions and the way in which we are elevating people? So I think those are topics to me that are actually very blended, because they come to the decisions we make when we set out, and how do we empower each other? How do we empower our crew chiefs? And how do we coalesce our tour around these values and bring those values throughout the different aspects of the tour?
Yeah, exactly. Like how, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that also moving forward, something that hit me, we have time. We're rethinking touring anyway. We know this, so we might as well start implementing, learning more about why we should implement these things. But something that I made a note on yesterday from our conversation was that Jen pointed out there's a misconception that sustainability costs more. It costs more if you don't think about it in advance, because then you're just trying to kind of put a Band-Aid on it. So I think that was something that I really took away. And that's something that we can start implementing, whatever that means, and having those conversations early with management, in choosing, as we discussed yesterday, maybe even just as a start, those 1 or 2 areas that you're willing to maybe bump up the budget just a touch, but maybe you're saving other places, and just to start on. So, even starting small, I realize it's very manageable with learning more.
I think there's going to be some really fascinating conversations, because Jean-Paul, I apologize to get it wrong, has asked a really interesting question, and I'm going to kind of parlay that into Ola's question, right? So Olga's question. So when we talk about emissions and we talk about emission measurement, the problem is that we can't quantify the individual actions. So we built a program called carbon offset. So you could buy back the carbon you spent, which actually doesn't quantify to anything, to be honest with you. There is no agreed mathematical equation of taking a complex eco-service system called the planet and quantifying our actions collectively across such a large system. And so when we think about a large tour being complex, then we think about the touring industry as complex, and we think about each individual action we have, because it's not unified across touring, and because there's so many different managers, designers, producers, directors, all with their own thought process. Touring's one of them industries that never unified, like, and agreed on principles, period. Like, it doesn't matter who you speak to. And I've done more than my fair share of these conversations. It's like, there's not a quantified, agreeable process of how to build a tour from a quantitative process, let alone impacts on the planet, which if Jean-Paul said, basically, the Commission by the European Commission found that 85% of the offset projects under the Kyoto Protocol's clean development mechanism failed. So basically COP, which is the kind of climate actions panel that happens, and the sustainable goals, which is set by 2030, are set to fail. Let's be very crystal clear so no one's getting confused here. Set to fail, that means that every government in the world is set to fail on their emission offsets by 2030 set a long time ago. So if everybody doesn't start to actually pay attention and innovate in the right places, none of this will matter, because there won't be a planet to live on. And it doesn't really matter whether you want to talk to me or someone else or any tour manager. You all have kids. They're going to have kids. And so this isn't really for us that have been in it for a while. This is really from the next generations. So what are we leaving behind? So there is a responsibility for everybody to actually put in the work. And if we're willing to innovate at tour level, from a pyro or like next LED perspective, we sure as hell better start innovating on the planet we live on. And if we're not going to do that, then a lot of it goes away. And this is the only opportunity you'll ever have where I call it ones and zeros, right? Like COVID came, there was a massive manufacturing well built on top of the planet that said we have all these arguments about climate between whether it's human or whether it's industrial, or whether it was like the universe. We shut down industry for a while. We now have clear metrics that say this is what happened pre-COVID, this is what happened during COVID. You guys are all sitting in COVID, so you know what happened pre and post. And if you don't go back and learn these tools now, you're never going to learn them, because who knows if we get the opportunity again. So this is the most exciting time to be alive in terms of taking new technologies, new ideas. People like Jen have been leading this charge for so long, trying to get us to understand what they've been fighting for. And if we all fail to show up and learn at this juncture, it's really on us individually. So I think it's an exciting time. But thanks for the question, John Paul. That was a great question.
I mean, I'm excited about doing it, right? Okay, so I get it. Even if my artist or the management isn't necessarily on board with making the biggest, best decisions that they could for the tour, I, at least as a tour manager, can implement a lot of stuff right from the get before I get into the advancing. We talked yesterday that at my level, at our level, it comes into building the tour and how I create every department. I can maybe have influence in ways where, even if it's lighting, like I can't dictate the entire lighting to be all LED, but I could ask about making sure that it's the most efficient lighting system or LED, asking my lighting crew chiefs to even think about that, empowering them to take a look at their own departments and then work with me on how I can make those calls as a tour manager. Same goes into catering and hospitality. We can make it, man, we all know that that's the biggest area of waste. Maybe, at least I see it. It's the most tangible waste that I see from every show, is how much food waste and plastic waste and so forth. So since this is sort of an intro to some of this, tangible little things that we can start doing into each department on tour.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, can I do one thing and I'm positive? Right?
Yeah,
I'm going
please.
to tell you again, I'm going to reinforce this: culturing solutions. Everything you do yourself is reinforcing the culture of good things. So even if you show up doing it every day, it's a bit like when you have to train your stagehands or your crew, your actions as a leader, regardless of what you're leading, is culturing solutions, right? Period. You're building a culture around it. You're building the language around it. You guys have power to culture solutions just by leading and doing it yourselves, even if it's one thing or two things, but it's in the conversation. I think Jen said that yesterday. She gets more excited by the no-says that are actually engaged than the people not engaged. So that was a great segue to Jen.
Thank you. Yeah, I talk about how, since my whole role is influencing decision makers, I put my decision makers in a couple buckets. And one of my favorite buckets of people are actually the cynics, because the cynics are usually willing to engage on an intellectual level, and they'll play with me. And I can actually, once we start engaging on that level, we can see movement. Because if I can solve their problem, if I can show a level of efficiency or solve the problem with logic, they will usually buy in. But it's getting buy-in. But so specifically, one of the things we talked about, I know that you guys were intrigued by when we talked about SFX, right? Which is that maybe the effects were already determined, that you're going to have pyrotechnics on your tour. And so that's a decision that you didn't have influence over. But now once you're there, you can actually talk to your effects team about how to capture the copper wire that is running through the effects. So I knew about this environmentally, but I hadn't been on a tour before. On my first tour, I realized that every night when the pyrotechnics team take off the remnants of their pyro, there is like pounds of copper wire. And those of you that know, copper is a very valuable material. It's also very toxic if compounded in the landfill. It leaches metals into the earth that get into the water of the ground table and then have environmental degradation in our water systems and our food systems. We don't want metals and electronics in the landfill. So one of the big things that we could be doing is empowering our lighting and our sound and our effects chief, saying, if you have any waste whatsoever on this tour, here's what you do with them. Because oftentimes what happens is they just get thrown in the trash bucket of the venue, and a venue isn't paying attention to your trash. So venues that claim to have recycling, they might have great recycling programs, but they do not give it to you. And now that I've been on a tour trust me, I'm on your team. Every venue manager I know intimately, I have called after my first tour. I was like, do you know what it's like to be in the basement of your venue? I was like, you claim to have this big recycling program, but I didn't see it. And so what I do with my crew chiefs, if I'm on a tour, is I make sure they know, hey, any materials, what's the plan? And you can decide. Normally what we would recommend is in the production office, you have a bucket or you have someone you radio, and your environmental person or your production team knows we can, before in advance of a tour, we can give you a list of places to call in each city should you have e-waste or hazardous waste or any of these materials. We could have partners already established with the tour that if you can't in that city, that you could ship it. And yes, sometimes it actually makes sense for you to carry the material with you to the next city to make sure it gets to the right place. So recycling copper wire is a great small thing, making sure nylon straps. A lot of your sound teams and anyone who's using rigging might have a lot of broken nylon straps. Nylon's a very durable material. So having a plan that says if you have a broken nylon strap, like call this person, we'll put it aside. Once we get it back, we're giving it to this nonprofit that will actually repurpose these nylon straps for creating materials. There's a lot of little things like that we could set up.
How about like audio department goes through tons of batteries?
Yes. So we have two types of batteries.
So that's a big issue, right? Redundancy. Right, we built an industry based on like non-failure. Like, I mean, actually, one of the most efficient businesses in the world is the live entertainment business. And there's actually companies working with Duracell right now to create like a hybrid battery, which is half dry cell, half rechargeable. Because the problem, of course, is the same as we went to digital consoles, which I remember very well. Being as old as I am, is like moved from analog to digital was we didn't trust the desks for a really long time. So there's a trust factor here, right? Like building trust factors into our operations. And so I actually think until we start really working towards rechargeable batteries, we're not going to get a result there, because the impact of these things on the planet is so dramatic right now. But in a short period of time, it's just how they get disposed of. And there is,
and so there's actually two categories of batteries, and you're tapping into it. The ones that are used are each day are lightly used. So when you're done with them, they're still good. And there are domestic violence centers and nonprofits and relief groups who would gladly take those batteries and use them in their provisions of flashlights and other relief materials. So
Jen, why don't you go to partnerships actually? Because that's a great way to talk about like finding partners that will take old sets, old products, old things, and you have to be willing to just give it up and let it go, but they can go back into local programs. We do that a lot with finding partners. And maybe Jen, you could touch on that a little bit, because I think that's a really important one. And we got a question on like, what can we do if I'm in a small van or a lighter tour? What are the things I can do locally? So maybe you could touch on some ideas for local partners, give back programs, batteries being one of them, sets being another one. And what are 4 takeaways for someone in a van tour, someone on a one truck tour?
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry, I'm seeing these notes coming through. I'm just seeing all the questions coming through.
I got you. That's one of my.
And Henry, were you just going to jump in there about the batteries?
No, I'd rather not. I'm just going to say how terrible I feel about batteries. I know there's some comments about, yes, rechargeable batteries have been around for a long time, but man, we all know that if the artist could afford it, it's fresh batteries every show. And we did that. We've been doing that for a long time. We wasted a lot of batteries. I feel bad about it now. So, switching to rechargeable and then using them, I can easily do that right now. Like that's such an easy change, right? We just gotta,
and even when you have rechargeable, you'll still have a few mic sets and other things that are easier to do.
I want to bring up one thing really important thing. Robert Schneider is here, is one of the people that I've really looked up to over the years, and is one of our leaders in the industry, and is saying that he's been using rechargeables for virtually everything. So we need more people like you, Bobby, to go out and champion these things, because once a younger generation see people like you doing it, they're like, oh, we can trust them. It is a trust thing with things like rechargeables, right? We got so used to this throwing stuff away for so long. This idea of regenerative and or circular economies is a reuse idea. So reduction and reuse. So thanks, Bobby. That's a great point.
Yeah, we did it on a recent tour, and it was really easy to sell to the artist, because I did a projection for 2 years of what we were spending on batteries across audio and backline. And I spoke to, I think the question about reliability is pertinent, but we spoke to somebody who was an expert and he said, it's nonsense. Use these ones, they'll be great. Get 2 sets so you can have them on rotation. You'll be great. And we used them across the whole album cycle, never had any issues. And if you can, it's a really simple thing to do. Just put an A/B comparative budget together for management. Here's a projection for 2 years. You're going to save. And it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars that we were going to save. And they were like, yes, of course, do that. Why aren't you doing it already?
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. It's to speak to what Anthony was talking about with Bobby coming up. It's like, once somebody else has done it in this industry, somebody's done it on hold, everything kind of goes by word of mouth. Somebody like Bobby's doing it, Doug's got it. If there's a track record, we can sell it, and the comparison budget as well, but I think you're right. That's so important to reach out and see who has done it.
Right. And one of the big topics, so we have a lot of topics coming up in the chat, right? So a lot of people are excited and want to talk about food waste, and we also talk about reusable bottles. So those are two of the big ones that a lot of tours have tried and successfully done. So there's proven models out there in some of these practices. Absolutely. Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm Adrienne.
Hi.
I was not able to meet you guys yesterday. I would just jump in and say that on Neil Young, we have a pretty much virtually green. He goes as far as he can. And we get the Dolphin water pumps. And instead of ordering flats of water, we order 5-gallon jugs for all of the dressing rooms. Stage left, stage right, extra for load in and load out. 2 or 3 of them in catering. And just randomly, and we carry the pumps, and every day I grab them. And I also get, and I know that Sarah Bennett has done it, and Sari Miller and Blair Picone, all, depending on who's available, everybody is super, super. We start to really, even how many water bottles do we actually need? We start with 11. If I don't need them, I knock them back. And I can tell you that some venues, as we've pulled through, have adopted the process and been like, wow, that makes all of the difference. Also, compostable or biodegradable cornstarch flatware. And also, instead of solo cups, you can get biodegradable plastic, same size. It's, no different in usage.
There's a lot of great innovations in that way. And yes, that's a great example of something that started out expensive, right? And to this day, the flatware, depending on the aesthetic, and if you want it branded with your tour, I mean, there's cost impacts, but there are finally biodegradable flatware that's cost neutral, finally. Yeah. Now, we have a couple of things coming up here. I was going to say, one of the things that I think part and parcel is the innovations that you see from vendors, right? So I don't know how many of you have heard of Our Cup or the reusable cup program that's coming in, and they've gone on a few tours and completely removed disposable single-use cups, both front of house and back of house. But the back of house is a little bit more challenging because you still want single use in that environment. There's still cases behind the scenes that single use is needed. So one of the big things I've been advocating is, if you are going to have single use, be plastic free. So someone just mentioned, what do we think about the cardboard water bottles that are cardboard single-use water that are becoming popular? There's a lot of different single-use water that's coming on the market that's not in plastic. That might be like just water in cartons or boxed water, or there's probably 14 companies right now. The thing about it that is so beautiful about reusable bottle programs, but also a challenge, is that there's still more room for innovation. People who are in rigging and who are climbing up don't like to have a bottle attached to their hip because of safety concerns. And then if there's a fast load in, load out, where do they place their bottle to keep track of it? So one of the things that you could do as a tour manager is check with your chiefs at the beginning, say, hey, your crew chiefs, and say, we're going to be doing a reusable bottle program. What support tools do you need for your team to have water where they need it? So, and at what times of day does your team need single use? Because sometimes your team might just need a single-use bottle because they're under the stage and you can't get to a reusable bottle. And so when you can kind of chart like a run of show, but you do your environmental run of show, where do you need what materials when, and where do you produce what waste when? And so one of the things would be as simple as, we were talking about tools, and Anthony asked me, what are simple tools? For any tour, any size, taking your writer and going through and inserting environmental language. When we follow up from this call, we have between Reverb, Effect Partners, Julie's Bicycle, and a couple other groups, there's a lot of great samples of enviro writers that are out there. I'm working with my team on a new writer that includes wellness and justice. So we're bringing environment with wellness and justice into it. That hasn't been released yet, but would love to share it with this community. But you can use your writer language, and then of course runs of show or in production notes, in instructions. You have all kinds of, where do you place your people check in their radios? What if we treated water bottles like radios? Because, you know, you might have someone go on leg one. One of the biggest things, water bottles and reusable water can save money. However, if people don't have a culture of reuse, what happens is you have to buy more bottles to keep them refilled after leg one to leg two. And for instances where they don't have water, like on the bus, you might end up still using single use. So the water budget is still expanding on reusable bottle programs in some tour conditions. So we can come together and innovate and actually change the culture of, well, what do you need? When do you need reusable water? Where else do you need bulk water? And that's the kind of thing where you just start the conversation. It's a simple solution. You just have to start the conversation a little bit earlier and empower your chiefs to, and your whole team to contribute.
And I'd say there's a couple of key things to there, which is that innovation word. We're seeing change already, and we're seeing even the chat, people talking about Holland and places that we've all worked in where there is actual real programs now. So culturing these solutions into everyday life and into our work is going to be what's really at the forefront. I love the radios and water bottle program. That's an epic one, Jen.
I wanted to say also, just to that point, I think it's kind of incumbent on us as tour managers, just as you were saying, Jen, there, to force the issue with what you said earlier. Really encouraged me that this is going on across the industry with our suppliers, and that's good to know that we're not the only force pushing for change here. But it might take you as the purchaser, in a relationship with a supplier or with a vendor. Bus companies, it really would not take a lot of effort to put a recycling bin in a bus. We did it on a, as many people know, I live in Canada. I was touring the US with a Canadian artist. This is not a competition, but recycling is much easier to find in Canada than it is in the US. That's a fact. Outside of California and maybe some of the more progressive states, that's simply a fact. And we made our own, first off, we made our own recycling bin, which the bus driver laughed at and threatened to throw in the trash if we didn't keep fighting. And I had to remind him who his employer was. And we tried on days off, actively tried. So we took it upon ourselves. We looked for recycling centers. And I'm interested in what you said earlier about there being a resource to find things like that. We ended up with 9 recycling bags in the trailer one day because we hadn't found a recycling center for days and days and days. It was nearly a week, and the trailer was starting to look like a trash heap. And the stagehands were crying with laughter every time they opened it every day. And all that it would have taken is some pressure on if every bus had a recycling chute next to the trash chute, none of that would have been an issue. And
you know as well as everyone here that's ever advanced a tour, right? The more the request, and I think Jen brought this up yesterday, and Adrian, nice to meet you. I know we missed a call yesterday, but one thing she said yesterday was, which is really important, which is like, when we're actually talking to the venues, the more we ask for it, the more they buy it, right? And the less we ask for it, the less they buy it. So the more we demand of it, the more they will. And from the vendor's perspective, they're investing whatever the clients are buying from them. So you guys are both purchasers from the vendors, right? And also executors at the venue level. So the more you and keep going and Jen's programs keep filtering into the industry, as long as you keep it going and don't quit, then they're going to have to at some point offer you up, programs for recycling. I know that Reverb, and I think it's here as well. I worked with them in 2017 when we very first started. They've been working at this for a really long time, and I'm sure Jen can attest to there. They've got lots of resources. But I think it's all about the individual now. I think it's individual actions making collective action overall.
Well, and I think, when corporations tackle sustainability, it works best when it comes from the top and the bottom, right? So it's not just an edict or permission from the top gives input on budgets. The top sets the value chain. The top says what's important. But the bottom is the one on the ground. And top and bottom isn't a great analogy, but the decision makers who control the purse strings can set the value priorities. But the people who are implementing the program that's been designed are the ones who see how it works. So so Effect Partners, Reverb, Julie's Bicycle, all of us do the same thing. When you bring us on, and if you have budget to bring on a dedicated green staff, we'll do a lot of this work for you. But even if we provide all these great things for you, you still need the people on each team to receive and interpret how to utilize those tools for their team. And so that's what I say, like the bottom up. It needs to be customized to each team, because it becomes down, what you are doing as a crew is creating a city that is traveling, and you're creating a community that has to have community values, and you're basically creating an infrastructure. And what I love about what Reverb and we at Effect Partners share in our approach is we're a big believer that you bring your own recycling bins with you, you bring your own signage with you, because each region, each city is different, right? The US, who I'm a proud resident and native citizen of, has some of the worst infrastructure for waste nationally than any country that you will tour in. There is no consistency across cities and states on where you can donate food waste, what kind of recyclables you can gather. And so tours are forced to do it themselves and then find partners. Someone mentioned that there's a list of recycling sites. Well, when you actually have a very robust recycling program, some of those recycling sites don't take all the same materials that you recycle. And so we actually partner with TerraCycle to ship recycling to them in some cities where their recycling infrastructure doesn't even accept the materials that our tour was recycling. So that's, it's just one of those things where, yes, you have resources. Yes, everyone's coming together, but we do want to start to understand how the programs live out through each individual department. And what I love, everyone who's speaking up in this chat, you clearly have a lot of leaders and innovators on the chat, because I love the energy of like, there's no excuse. People can clean their bottles, like get over it.
Hey, Jen,
yeah.
Why don't you hold on TerraCycle and explain TerraCycle? Because I think that's actually really important conversation to give people hope that actually people like Tom are driving change.
Yes.
And then
yeah. Well, I just wanted to finish that one thought though, which is everyone who's here that's saying, hey, you're calling bullshit on your peers for like why they don't get with the program. I hear you. And some of their concerns actually help, not your concerns. I'm saying you people on this comment thread, you're clearly the Avengers, like you know what you're doing. But there are some people on your team who are helping us find the holes in the program. So I welcome the criticisms and the naysayers, because those are true weaknesses. Like if someone doesn't have cold, like you could put a tub of water on a stadium show, and if it's not cold, then someone really can't enjoy drinking that. You're giving them hot water, they're not going to be hydrated enough. And that's a health issue. So I'm okay with naysayers, and I love how you guys are not the naysayers. But yeah, so TerraCycle, RCup, there's a couple different companies that are out there. I think I'm still learning about Planet Home, but it seems like you guys are in this direction, in this space. TerraCycle is creating a closed loop solution, and they have been at it for a long time. So they have started with one category, and then they slowly added other categories, but they're trying to offer a market-based solution for you to purchase something in packaging. And then when you're done, that packaging gets returned and is repurposed or properly handled. So it's a closed loop. And most of the products that they've chosen, they are able to do it. They've chosen a whole skew of products and product lines, from cigarettes to yogurt containers, that they now have relationships with manufacturers. So if you can give them the bulk of that material, they can get that material back to be utilized as material for future products. So you don't have to get virgin material as you create.
Right. So you're saying that there may be a way that we could package up all of our gaff tape and make a giant gaff tape ball and send it to somebody, and then they can reuse it?
I would say if, so the guy that created that also created another program called Loop, which is like, if you imagine Amazon, where they, you will send the packaging back and they kind of recreate it. So we talked earlier about regenerative systems, which is one conversation, in circular economies, which is another. The idea is that we're trying to create a circular loop now in our product development, product delivery, so that we can reuse it. So I haven't heard of anyone come up with that, but I'm sure I will send that note to Tom and see if he's interested. But it is really about what Jen was saying, is really about the innovation. And I think that's what I think that everyone should start to do. And that's why I think it was good to hold on TerraCycle, because these aren't traditionally in touring, right? These were things that are in our everyday lives that are now coming in, and being optional for us to offer up these ideas from the industry to corporations or companies like TerraCycle to what's the program that you mentioned earlier, Jen? The One Cup.
Our cup, yeah, it's a reusable cup
program that, these are this is what you got to spread. You got to kind of share them so they can go in writers or they can go in conversation. But TerraCycle is a great one. Our Cup's another one.
Yeah, and our cup's moving into the reusable cutlery place, right? So one of the things that would be possible on a tour is your cutlery would actually be reusable, but at the end of each show stop, you would put it all in a box, close up the box, it already has packaging on it, you leave it, and if it's in a city where it can be processed there, it'll be processed there. If not, it's shipped. So once again, I said at the very beginning, there's going to be trade-offs and complex topics. So yes, we're shipping something, but we are now not having to create new virgin materials every time you eat something. And so arguably speaking, that shipping cost is worth it to not have to create a virgin plastic extraction from oil.
And I think it's interesting because that is something as tour managers we're used to looking at as the big picture, which is exactly what you're talking about. You take somewhere, but you give somewhere else. And it's about the bottom line, which is what you're talking about. It's like, well, it might be more expensive to do this, but we're making up for it in the big picture. Something I also wanted to say that I kind of keyed in on, that since we get a lot of questions about how to get into touring and whatever, and I think it's so great, is you guys have both touched on it, is that there are new positions on tour now as, the environmental rep. And that's a really exciting new area for people to get on tour. It's very viable.
And for those that maybe, I know, or at least my own small limited experience, with our people who maybe get caught in a certain department in touring and want to move out or kind of move around. I think green skills building is absolutely the way to go, Mary. Like, it's not even that you have to be like, yes, you could be the green person, or you could be a tour producer, or you could be a tour, PA or whoever. I'm using funky terms. Sorry, guys, I get excited and I just start running. Who has those green skills. And I think it makes you more desirable. I know a lot of tours are trying to have their hospitality person have green credentials, or have like, I think we're going to find that certain roles and certain functions are naturally going to ask to have a higher level of knowledge about environment than maybe other areas. And so looking at how to cross train, and absolutely. So if you have a passion, if you're on this call and you have a passion for one area, if you could learn about the environmental impact of that area and start championing that within that context, that would be incredible. It'd be a great way to contribute.
That's also going to add to your skill set. And like you said, really just an excellent add-on, more added value to your resume, more tools in your war chest. It makes you far more valuable, especially moving forward into time when we're trying so hard.
And a lot of what we're talking about right now is the higher end of touring, where you can potentially look at bringing somebody on who's a standalone expert. But a lot of this scales down to smaller tours, to van tours, to one bus tours. And I think the thing that's important, and it's really stayed with me, is that making small changes still, if you can affect a change in your crew members, they might very well carry that forward in their life. I had a crew member where, it's just a tiny example, but I had a crew member who on a tour where I purchased reusable water bottles, and I instigated some small changes on a one bus tour. I hired him for another band, and he came to the tour with his reusable water bottle. Now that's a tiny little thing, but he carried that outside of the tour and continued it in his daily life. And that is affecting change outside of your tour.
Or here's a great one. This is 8th Day Sound. It was a tour gift 5 years ago, and I still use it on every tour. So like your vendors, if they're going to do tours.
Well, I think that's the critical thing, because look, this is our little kind of cutlery package we made for the event, and it's we made it in 2017, and now we make them all the time. It's got a little carabiner, and everyone should be making these little kits or asking the vendors to. So versus getting t-shirts, there's no reason why you can't get a water bottle. Like t-shirts and jackets and crew jackets are cool, but water bottles are too. Thanks, Mary.
We gave out water bottles on Neil because we were bringing in water, so we did tour branded water bottles, and we gave them to everyone so that they had them, and they had little tiny carabiners on the top so you could clip them on if you wanted to. I have mine. It's amazing. I take it hiking.
And I think that goes back to when, when there's a lot of questions over what can we do every day, then micro actions, which make the massive collective actions, actually you can start right there. Because I think that part of the problem is when we think the problem's too big, we don't work on it. When we
I have
think
a question for you, Anthony. What the cutlery that was in that pouch, what's it made out of?
Bamboo.
Bamboo.
And my son has them. He's got some chopsticks. Everyone has them. Like if you.
Is that what he was doing? Was he running that in? We
No,
saw.
actually, he was
Sorry,
actually
Adrian.
trying to get a charger for his iPad.
I was gonna buy cutlery kits for my band and crew this year on tour as beginning of the year gifts. I'll just fast forward that. But.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think that goes back to I think that there's so many small things we can do.
And I feel like they would be used and at the very least cut down cutlery, possibly on the bus with after show food. So you don't get that, not only do you have stuff there, but then you get all the amount of utensils that shows up with after show food, and it's plasticware, and it's like, oh my God, so much waste. So yeah. Perhaps if we can stop that influx, even that small thing.
But I think with someone like what you're doing, especially with the type of tour you're on, I think what people have to realize, especially in this industry, is the impact that you make is culturally very significant. So even if you got one person to think about single-use plastic, right, across the plastics period, and or single-use batteries on one tour, they will go home and they will take that culture with them. And so you guys are in such a powerful position to change the culture of thinking that then makes it easier for people like Jen when she's coming in to do the training, where they go, oh, I remember that because on blah, blah, blah tour, they got me this water bottle, I've already got my bottle, or blah, blah, blah. And so I think every single thing that we do right now, when it starts to scale in communication and everyone starts to talk about it, it will start to make the impact really big. And I think culture in these things is really important. And Adrienne, that's amazing that you guys are on the forefront of that. That's awesome.
That's great.
There's a question from John Paul in the Q&A. It says, should the touring industry influence festivals a lot more to reduce the vast amount of non-recyclable waste? And I'll ask this to you, but preface it by saying the sense I get, at least from a lot of the festivals I've been to, is that the festivals are actually some of the first to start implementing these changes, because they are one-off standalone events with almost like a corporate structure, whereas touring is disparate artists coming through venues, and it's their day, then it's a different tour the next day. So does that tally with your experiences?
I can talk to that if you want directly, because the reason, one of the things that I did when I set up Planet Home was to move far away from the touring industry, because I couldn't see the implementation that I could see in single large events. And so most of the tools that we built were around single day events or weekend events, because we could be in complete control of the ecosystem. And it was impossible to go end to end, which we wanted to do with something, unless you have in control of the complete ecosystem, from the site to the location to the build to the design. So I would say that, and there was a note earlier on one of the questions about Coachella's impact. I can't speak for anyone else. I can speak for us that we've had 100% track record, but that was because we learned, innovated, fell down a lot. I mean, we fell down so much, but we didn't really want to kind of quit at the doing a part. So from a personal perspective, and I can only speak from my own personal and those that have worked with me, that we worked really hard from an ecosystem to make sure that all of it was addressed. On the touring side, I think it would have to come from all of you. It couldn't come from one place, because you touch so many venues and so many vendors. So it would probably take a few more, committed individuals to do it at scale.
Yeah, I think from a festival, and there's a couple questions I'd like to try to tie together for a second, because I see I love this active group of, I shouldn't expect anything less from tour managers. But the festivals with permanent sites or reoccurring locations. So, and I don't like putting Burning Man as a festival, because I'm a burner, and yes, I like to think it's separate, but let's be honest, it's a festival. But Glastonbury, Burning Man, Coachella, places that have long-term agreements, Bonnaroo. Right. Any place that has a long-term agreement, even though they're temporary, they have built such great relationships and stewardship of the land that they're on, that they're really building great sustainability into the plans. I know that Claire and others are promoting a greener festival in here on the chat, so definitely check that out. So I think festivals are leading the charge. However, we also have as the market shifting, right, we have these artist driven festivals and we have these kind of newer creations that aren't as permanent and they don't have the infrastructure and the support behind these multi-year festivals. It's kind of like a startup company versus a corporation, right? So they, I think they could benefit from the artists raising that expectation of them. But once again, that's an artist conversation. Seeing the artist say, I expect, even though you're a new festival, I expect you to learn from your peers and bring this minimum level of best practice standard, right? Yeah.
Well, but this is the big question, right? So even on both sides, and I've seen it fail on the festival side as well as the other side, best practices. I mean, that's going to be really one question for you guys to take away as an industry is like, how do you guys want to build best practices? Because it's going to come down to you guys. Like, as much as we can get help and support from amazing industry leaders like Jen and obviously Adrienne, like it's going to come down to industry practices. Like, how can you take these things and make them practices so that they become the normal conversation, so that no different to health and safety. And we talked about this yesterday with Jim Digby when he first started the event Alliance Safety idea, which was a while ago. It took him a decade, maybe even longer, to get that fully fledged out. But it took, I think, 200 people to contribute to that first version. And that meant he had to go to every expert across the industry, get them to sign on, from legal to insurance companies. You know, I think that there's going to be an onus on sort of the industry itself to want to take on the work and contribute. And whether this is, and it could start here with you guys, because you could gather enough intelligence and enough people to put that manual together with someone like Jen leading the charge, or Adrienne, like, to actually build best practices, because I think then it starts to stand up on both sides of the coin.
Well, and so this is actually a place where I think I always kind of have a very controversial opinion of, I don't know, which is that, you know, those standards exist, especially in the UK, right? The ISO 20021 or 120, I say it wrong. Thank you. I knew I was saying it wrong. Those standards for events and festivals work and exist, but they're dense and they're thick, and they require, you almost need a project manager just to manage the certification in that level of detail, which is why Effect Partners and Reverb does so well, right? Because let
me challenge you on that for a second.
Wait, let me finish my thought. You have to hear, you can challenge me once you understand what you're challenging. Give me one more second. So this is where I'm going with this my controversial thought is this. There are standards that we can have that are a simplified version of that. Absolutely. That to me is the baseline. But what I've observed is in the culture, there's such a competition of like, everyone's trying to differentiate themselves from other tours, especially artists, in terms of what they're doing. So when I'm guiding tours on how to differentiate, people like to compete in our industry, like sustainability professionals. Anthony and I, even though we just had a little back and forth, I love Anthony already. Like, we are so collaborative. I think Anthony and I are going to keep working together on other things. Like sustainability people want to collaborate, but the actual artists and the promoters and the people worrying about ticket sales, they want to differentiate. And so oftentimes when I'm, you know, I work with AEG and Live Nation at the same time. So I'm working on their and they all want their program to have the best marketing pizzazz. So what I have to do is I have to differentiate their program while also using standards. And that's the name of the game, right? How do you have a baseline that meets a standard, but then where do you differentiate to kind of give oomph and motivation? So one of the areas, so where I'm a little bit more controversial is, I don't need the programs to publicly look the same, but I want them to operationally look the same. So operationally, I want the standards there, but then I want to work with the messaging side to tell a different story and actually build a crew and fan engagement that connects to the authenticity and the storytelling component that the artist has. So that's where I'm controversial. Like, I want the standards, but I also want to make
it. Though that's exactly where I was going. I mean, I was going, if you break it into two pieces for a second, which is health and safety that didn't exist when I got here to how it exists today. It was actually the crews that built the safety policies, period. So it can be the crews that can build the actual policies and operational methodologies for putting these things into practice. It doesn't have to get caught up in the promotions and marketing pieces. This industry is built by these guys. These are the ground up guys. They can quite happily put together the manuals, the riders, because they're the ones that are doing that work. So I think if you break the thing in two halves for a second, your end piece of that is where I was going, is like, I actually think that's where the win is. Getting operationalized through the crews, through the tour managers, through the production managers, giving them the tools to say, hey, this is how we operate a tour. And if you don't run your tour this way, then you're not in the A list, you're in the C list. And that's how the industry got built from the very beginning, in the back of a horse truck.
Guys, just to add to this conversation, I wanted to bring in Mariah Kinnemer, our great friend. And Mariah is the Live Nation rep for Fleetwood Mac. And she's super passionate about the greening initiatives and has managed to sort of, in a culture that, you know, is big and chugs along and has quite a large footprint, she's managed to incorporate some interesting things. So I wanted to bring her in to chime in about the operational aspect of how it could actually work on a current good size tour. I think your mic's muted, darling. Nice to see you, Mariah.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, I was the person in the chat saying you should be able to figure out where to clean your own water bottle.
Right.
Quick background on me. My dad created the recycling center of the town I grew up in. I've been composting since I was born. I've used reusable bags since I was a kid. So none of this is new concept to me. It's how I've always lived my life. And when I started to tour and I saw the plastic bottles, which was over a decade ago, I brought my own. By the second tour I had went to REI, I got my own camping bowl. I got with a little lid, my utensils fit inside it, and of course a reusable water bottle. And this goes to what was kind of going on in the chat was, and what Anthony was saying, be the example. Just live your life how you want to be and just do it. And people make fun of me. My last name's Kinnemer. As you can see, as a child, I was called Mariah Cleaner Air. So it is definitely something I've been with for the 38 years of life, but be the example. And I finally had people on the bus asking, can I use your bowl? Because they saw how easy it was. And why use that bowl? And then someone said they were on a tour and they left with someone coming back, bringing a water bottle. And that's exactly what just happened on Fleetwood Mac with me. I definitely have about 6 people that wrote me after the tour and said, I take my own cup to my coffee shop now. And I think if we can't affect change on the grand scale of the tour, if you can do it yourself, you may influence 3 people, you may influence the artist, you may influence a manager, and all of it could trickle down from there. But I think you start with your own self, your own accountability, and show people how easy it is to be green, how easy it is to pick a different bottle over something else. I do have a slightly different perspective from you guys. I am a promoter rep for Live Nation. I'm not salary, I mainly contract through them. And I've been hounding them for years to try to be more green, or even just partner with Reverb on a regular basis. Like when you are booking the tour, because we need to get ahead of it. When you're booking the tour, why not reach out to the artist and say, would you like to partner with Reverb? You know, at the beginning, so then tour managers, production managers, they all recycle at home, but then when they're told we have to figure out how to make a whole freaking tour recycle, it adds to their workload, you know? And so it's just getting ahead of it. And as a promoter rep, that's what I try to get ahead of. And when I know I'm assigned to a tour well in advance, I reach out to the tour manager, production manager, and say, how green you guys want to be, and see if we can make it happen.
And thanks for your leadership in that, Mariah. I have to tell you, the tours that I've been able to work on are because the promoters brought us in early. And the promoters, I mean, sometimes it's the artist, but a lot of time the promoter, it's a huge leadership role for the promoter. One thing that we've been skirting around, but we haven't said out loud, and I think I just want to say it, and I think we've all been saying it, especially Anthony, because you're such a champion for this, is that crew and fan engagement, like the tone and the approach to how we engage both the crew and the fan in this topic, is one of the biggest areas of opportunity and one of the biggest linchpins for making the behavior stick. So it's, you know, I think Anthony said it earlier, like you as tour managers bringing your water bottle, it's how you practice it, but it's also taking that time, like what Mariah's saying, like to build it into the narrative of the tour. Like every tour has a tone, has a culture that's established. And as tour managers, it doesn't have to be green, doesn't have to sound or look like other green programs. It can look like the culture of your tour. Mumford & Sons did a great job of this when we had a chance. Both Effect and Reverb got to work on Mumford & Sons, which was fun. But they had sassy as F signage on their recycling. That was like, cool kids recycle. If you don't recycle, you're not cool. We're only friends with cool kids. Like, it's like, that was their tone, this kind of hipster, folky, little edgy, like, hey, we're all recycling here. It's a small little thing that like, it's like integrating the messaging of how you tell your commitment to sustainability and thinking about these fun, clever ways, like throughout all your communications, even if you started to just rename a couple things with an eco-minded name in your, like coming up with coming up with your cultural eco vocabulary is something that helps you make it yours, and make it come alive in the culture.
I think that's just the only thing you have to split out is like, you know, I brought up a reference earlier about health and safety. If you're on the production management side, then you can really start to think about these as like health and safety tools. You know, I remember when we first started hiring experts back in, and this is in England before we had it in North America, to come in and make sure that our tours were very, very health and safety friendly. When we started dealing with, you know, weather and weather conditions, and we had to do that in the very early days before that was actually conventional. Now it's conventional. The real push is now to make this conventional. So operationally, production has to operationalize it. And then from a promote and marketing point, you're completely right. They have to find their own culture to it. And the two things have to meet in order to culture them solutions to make sure they stand up. But I can't say how I'm excited to hear that this conversation is even taking place, to be honest. So
and we're actually a little past the 90 minutes. So, I mean, this has gone so fast, and thank you guys for being on, and thanks, Mariah, for hopping on.
Yeah, nice to meet
Thank
you.
you. Nice to meet you. I'd love to talk to all you so much more.
Well, there will be more. We're going to have we're actually, that is a great thing. We're actually going to do some breakout sessions. This has been so great. And we're working on planning some breakout sessions so we can go a little deeper. So stay tuned for more information on that. We'll be getting that out to people as we move forward in planning these. And meanwhile, we're going to have a list of greening resources on the Tour Management 101 website at tourmanagement.org. And that list will be kept updated so that you can check back on it. It's a document of Jen's that she keeps updated all the time. So you can keep checking it. It's massive.
It's massive. So I took a lot of notes. So if you put quotes in here that weren't on mine, I think there were 2 links that were in the chat. I grabbed them, so I'm putting them in. But if you, from a sustainability perspective, I just want to see this work done. I just want you to have the tools you need to get this work done. I think everyone kind of has that. It's a collaborative space when it comes to sustainability.
I think that's the one thing everyone should pay attention to as well, is that this is a collaborative space. It actually isn't competitive. So because there was so few people doing it, I think, for so long. So you'll find a lot of people willing to give you as much information as you ask for. It's certainly an open, welcoming space. And I think that's a really critical part. This isn't about being perfect. This is not about getting it right. It's actually about trying. It has zero to do with being perfect. And then trying means that we do one thing every day and 2 things every day. So no one has to be perfect. No one has to make it like it's the perfect tour, the perfect gig. It's like, if you're doing something, you're doing more than nothing. It's like going to the gym for the first time and getting back in health. And I think health is getting better. I see a lot of people doing yoga, a lot of people drinking more water, a lot of people thinking about spirituality. I think the world's getting to a place now where we're trying to take care of ourselves better. And Jen, thank you so much for mentioning earlier how you guys are starting to weave in health and wellness now. But I would say the onus is on you to do something, but it's not to be perfect, and just try. And the space is super open to everyone. So it's not some weird wall where you can't get in. It's about normalizing good behavior with the planet, I think.
And watch the space for more, because we will have much more information.
Adrian.
Oh, I was just being animated.
Yeah, I think something Anthony said earlier, I just want to echo too, is the fact that you guys created this space for your self-growth and to lift each other up and keep each other focused on what you chose. I just want to acknowledge you guys spiritually, just because what you chose to do in light of COVID, and you choose to come together. I only learned about Tour Management 101 when I learned about this webinar, but I've been watching all the old videos, and there's a lot of heart and compassion here that has been needed in this time. And for that, but you're taking this time to rebuild, reflect, and Doug, thank you for speaking into how that's the same way we need to approach becoming anti-racists, the same way we have to approach. We all have learned a lot of behaviors innocently and sweetly. So thank you for putting your hearts here and creating a space for us to learn and unlearn the behaviors that don't serve, and learn from each other behaviors that will. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. That is a great note.
Rob, I just wanted to, we have these touch points where we touch back to other episodes, and I just kept thinking about what Fitzjoy was saying, which was something that really sparked our greening conversation. He said that he tried to do this years ago and he couldn't get the crew or, the folks to, like, basically, he
want to do it.
doing a no bottle, no flats of water, and found that the tour production coordinator was lugging cases of water to the bus, and the crew was mutinying, and it wasn't happening. And I think that really sort of brought us to, wow, people really want to do better these days, and there are all these outlets. Let's show everyone these outlets. And then to your point, you know, it's like the concept of each one teach one.
I think that's a great point. And he also got better through actually spirituality and yoga as well. And I think that brings it all back around. So
yeah, so that was today's touch point to a previous
awesome.
Everybody,
well, I got to say, I'm so thankful to be here. I'm honored to be here actually, and to see the industry.
Thank you for
We're honored to have you guys.
And we really look forward to being able to have the opportunity to take our students and ourselves and everyone who wants to join together to go down a deeper dive journey while we have the time to actually plan it and do it, you know, because it's hard to think about revising your entire process when you're trying to move a city or even a mini town from place to place every day. So the fact that we have this respite to learn new things, and then as we come up, we've created best and better practices.
Yeah.
When we come back online.
I believe that we can make a difference in the industry from this channel, and we have been for months now. So there's no reason that we can't dig into this deeper and really make a big change. And so thank you for everybody for joining in. This is Tour Management 101. We're changing the world one show at a time. Look, have a great day. We'll see you Thursday. We have a special guest, Michael Jobson, Curly. If you guys know him, he's a legend in the industry. Is going to join us on for Thursday's special guest. But have a great week. Like you said, we're going to post more things on the website. So stay in touch and have a great week. Be safe.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks again, Mariah. Thanks for joining in.
For joining us, Mariah. It was lovely.
Yep.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Mariah.